Hey, everybody, and thanks for joining us for another episode of Throat Punch Monday. I am your host, Pacific Tita, aka Lynn, and I'm joined with my co-host Cliff and my new co-host Brandy. She's our newest addition to Veteran Trash Talk. She's not new to podcasting, but she's here with us now. And I have our good friend Laura, who is an author and combat veteran. It's the month of June. And so this month we're celebrating, it's PTSD Awareness Month. We have Father's Day, which also falls on Juneteenth. And then we have Women's Veterans Day. But without further ado, Cliff, go ahead and take us away if you have anything to talk about.
I just want to add, with it being PTSD month, and to somebody who struggles with PTSD and who is also a suicide survivor, this at this month, just take the time to reach out to a friend or a coworker or somebody who maybe is acting a little bit different. Throughout the month of June, like I always do on my Facebook page and all my social media, I post the signs and symptoms of PTSD and stuff. And so just take the time to get yourself familiarized. And if they're having issues or problems, it may not be suicidal, but maybe they just want to talk to somebody or listen. And so, just pick up that phone or text that friend or family member just to say hi and just to see how they're doing, because really a kind gesture can really change somebody's mindset, that's not in a good way on that day. So that's all I have to say. And thanks for tuning in. It's going to be a great show. I'm very happy to have Brandy with us and very excited to talk with Laura. I read all your stuff online, Laura, and pretty impressive. And so I'm happy to have you here today.
Thanks for having me.
Hey, I'm glad that you mentioned to call your friends, Cliff. I would go ahead and add, call the ones who are funny and outgoing too, because they're probably masking something. It's so much more easier to fake it than to like fake being sad. It's easier to fake being happy than fake being sad. And I am one of those. I would have to say the other day, I was just feeling so down, and I was getting really into my feels, and the demons were coming out. And I was like, man, this it was just spiraling down. But then I went on our group, VTT Official, and I saw a meme, something about warriors within. And I was like, oh my God, I really needed to see this. And it helped me go through the day, and a lot of people are like, wow, there's no way like you suffer from mental illness or PTSD, because what does it really look like?
Yeah.
What does PTSD or mental illness look like? I mean, it looks like you, it looks like me, it looks like somebody down the street. It could be a homeless person. It could be me with a nice job. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not complaining about my life or anything, but we all go through it. So check on everybody.
Well, anytime you have trauma, and with PTSD, it always it's in your mind, right? And it sneaks back in, not at good times. And so you might be sick, you might be having stress with bills, your kids might be something or whatever. I took Lloyd to school this morning, and the car in front of me, the little kid gets up and he looks at his dad, and all of a sudden he just blows chunks. And so that Father's Day just completely went sideways. Went to drop his kid off at school.
Did he throw up on you, or wait, what happened?
No, next to his car. But he dropped the kids off, and he got out and he looked at his dad, and then he just threw up. And I was like,
oh
wow.
My goodness.
And I've gone through that with Lloyd. And just like you said, just at any time with PTSD, those demons can sneak back in. And that's why we do our show. And that's why all of us are here, is to kind of help everybody, that when those demons sneak in, just like what Lynn was saying, she went out and she looked at something on social media that kind of helped her change her mindset. And that's kind of really what we want to do.
Yeah, it's elusive. It's this elusive creature.
Sometimes you don't want to be vulnerable. Like, that's part of like my trauma, is I want to be strong and mask it, and I don't want to ask for help, or I don't want to be vulnerable online, because people would be like, oh, look at her, she's a bitch, or she's being emotional. Oh, a typical woman. Like, no, I don't want to bring that sort of attention towards me. So I don't really like try to say anything. But somebody saw my comment on there, and I said, my comment was I really needed to see this. Thank you. And that somebody actually messaged me, and I was like, wow, they're paying attention. And so that really meant a lot. So it's going to be Women's Veterans Day. When is Women's Veterans Day, Brandy?
So it's going to be June 12th. So I know Texas, they celebrate Texas Women Veterans Day here as well. So it's something that they really do take seriously. I love seeing that our sisters in arms are celebrating other sisters in arms. Like, it's something that it needs to happen. Unfortunately, we don't see it enough. And I mean, especially, it is PTSD Awareness Month. and people really don't think about that. They don't think about, women having PTSD and what that looks like, and I think that it's great that they have that sense of community and fellowship, just because so many women veterans, like, we spread the winds, we really don't interact with each other after the service. And I think that having that sense of camaraderie, person to understand you, is really important. And I think that it's something that we a lot of times feel that we're by ourselves, and we shouldn't.
Right, I agree. Oh, okay, I remember now, Laura. So when you were on the episode, it was Women's History Month. Remember that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And then they were like, oh, why are we celebrating Women's History Month? Well, the
Yeah.
same reason why we celebrate Women's Veterans Day. Everyone's like, well, we already have a Veterans Day. Well, yes, we know we have a Veterans Day, but are we really like focusing on women's accomplishments and all the things we've been through? Because I mean, we've been through so much in such a short period of time, and accomplished a lot of firsts, and even
Right.
in our era. So I think it's important to see that, um, to show, there's people that we can look up to, people like me who look like me, or,
Right? That makes
of the
sense.
same gender.
Well,
What I
and
mean?
Len, you nailed it on the head when you had said, people look at you as a female as like, oh, you're acting too feminine, or you're too emotional. I just wrote, I do a weekly blog, and my weekly blog this week is about working moms, because it was just Mother's Day, and how we have all these biases towards working moms, and we don't even realize it. For example, when I became principal, two of my superiors said, because I was a principal of a middle school, they said, are you sure this is the best thing for your family? And I got emotional, not because I was like, oh, maybe it's not, but because I was thinking, I'm sorry, would you ever say this to a man? No, you would say to a man, congratulations, this is the best thing for your family. And so just these little subtle microaggressions or biases can really hamper a woman's joy and enthusiasm for moving on to the next step in life. And so I feel like because those things still exist, we do need to have a separate day for us, or a separate month for us, or whatever it might be, because we're still up against a lot more challenges than our counterparts.
Right. And it was, I mean, back in the day, they had like, they called the women's part of the military auxiliary, or not even like, you know what I mean? Like it was waves, or it was, um, what is it, Brandy?
Whack, waves,
Whack.
wasps.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I
Yeah.
actually met a lady that was in the WAC recently when I was inducted to the Women Veteran Oral History exhibit at UTSA, and she was explaining, like,
Congratulations.
yeah, I had no clue why they picked me, but anyway, I was thankful to be there. But honestly, like, there's generals there. I'm like, why am I here? I'm an E5. But no, it was great hearing from them, because they were saying, like, when we first came in, like, they were a WAC. I was able to meet a WASP a SPAR, when I was running for Miss Veteran America. But they were saying that the jobs were so limited then. There's 3 jobs you could have as a woman veteran. I mean, or a woman serving, should I say. And I mean, think of that to now. Like, I mean, there's really no limitations for a female. But, not even 60 years ago, that was quite the opposite. I mean, you getting pregnant, like, you were out of the military. Like, you couldn't have that work-life balance. That wasn't something that existed then.
Yeah.
You didn't usually go to forward locations. You didn't, do much that, women felt that, they were really serving, and then they really expanded it, within our lifetime. I mean, it's just wild to see, how much change in such a short period of time, like you were saying.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I like how you talked about pregnancy, because I remember being pregnant back in 2004 or 2005. And so I got taken off the ship. So I was on a ship, for a deployed ship. And you have to be off the ship because it's not safe for a pregnant woman to be on board. Okay, so I am off the ship long enough to give birth. And so they give you about 6 weeks to recover, right? After birth. And then I was right back on a ship, and I was right back going underway and getting deployed, even though I was breastfeeding. And it's like the middle of the summer, and I'm in San Diego. And granted, it's not as hot in San Diego, but like if you're standing in the sun directly, like it's hot. So I'm
Trying to pump underway.
but
What
yeah,
would that
and
be like?
that's my point. Like there was no places to pump on the ship. Like there's no, it's forward deployed. Like that's not a place for a woman who is nursing. And
You're like
so
in your
I
wrap
would,
in the daylight.
Yet.
Yeah. And so I would leak through my uniform and even with the pads. And so I would have to put on a jacket in the middle of the summer and they'd be like, shipmate, well, why are you wearing a jacket? It's 85 degrees outside. First of all, I'm leaking. Second of all, I'm still recovering from giving birth. And so I'm so glad to see that there is like that much progress that's happened now that women don't go on forward deployed units until a whole year after at least giving birth. And so I think that was a main factor that a lot of women got out because they didn't have that time with their child. You know, they always say your child doesn't come in your sea bag, right? But I mean, it's important to have that work-life balance.
Yeah.
Is there is there anybody you wanted to highlight for Women's Veterans Day, Brandy?
For me, I mean, there's so many women veterans that are out there. I mean, I celebrate all of our sisters, especially the ones that are really trying to strive for change. I love seeing that there are so many women veterans in the like they're trying to be more active in their speaking. I do you mean like a veteran that is well known, or like a veteran that maybe history wise you wanted me to talk about?
That's great. All right, let's switch gears. Laura, so
Yes.
you've been on Veteran Trash Talk before.
Oh,
Let's talk about you. So I downloaded your book. It's called
awesome.
Pee Standing Up, right?
Yes. Sirens, how to pee standing up.
How to Pee Standing Up. You can get it on Amazon. I actually downloaded it on Apple Books. So you can download it on Apple Books electronically, or you can get the copy on Amazon, right?
Yeah, and I did audio version. I read it
Mhm.
myself in my closet because it was the only place that had good soundproofing, and you can get that on Google Play.
Yeah.
Nice.
I actually saw the audio version on Apple also.
Oh, awesome. Good. Yeah, I mean, it's probably going to expand, and my hope is to get on Audible someday because that's a huge market there.
So I literally just downloaded it like a week ago and I didn't get through the first, I only got through the first 2 chapters. I'll read the whole book. And the beginning is talking about your life, joining, like you're from Wisconsin, right?
Yes.
And
You
is
can't
is
tell
it
by the way I talk.
is it what part of Wisconsin? Is it a small town?
Yeah. So I mean, I grew up in northern Wisconsin for the first 8 years. And then did you hear it there, Brandy? The accent.
Don't you know? I'm from northern Wisconsin myself.
Don't you
Right.
know?
And now,
Yeah.
and now I'm central Wisconsin.
Okay.
But I lived for about 17 years in Madison, Wisconsin. And then I lived in England for a little while and Fargo for a little while. And then, I was deployed for 16 months. That's a long time to be away too.
Where in the UK?
It was called Aylesbury, and it's between Oxford and London.
Ooh, I live by Cambridge. It was amazing.
Oh, nice.
Loving
Nice. Yeah.
So the first chapter, my take on it was pretty much you went into the military and it was like a culture shock. Just the way you were treated and the way they talked to you, and you're like, what did I get myself into? And I think just that first couple chapters is a good book for anyone who's thinking of joining, especially coming from a small town, or especially like you're not used to that kind of environment, hostile. And
Right. I mean, if this was the face of ignorance in 2001 when I signed up, I had no idea. I was like, oh, an adventure, a reason to stay in shape, pay for college, travel the world. Why not? It was 6 months before September 11th happened, complete peacetime.
Yeah, what could happen?
Yeah, well, that's what my friend said. What could happen in the next 6 years? And yeah, I was super naive to the ways of the military. And I mean, I grew up in, middle class, but privileged, and a very nice family. And I always followed the rules. So like, I never got yelled at. I never got harassed. I just walked through life and, it was fine. And then I get there and these people are giving me a hard time. I'm like, listen, you don't have to do this. I'll do what you say without it.
Right. So I remember you said that you picked being an MP because it was the MOS that would get you closest to actually fighting or doing something.
Yes. That is exactly right. It was the closest a woman could get to the front lines, which I feel like is an archaic term anyways. And plus my dad was an MP, and I just want to do something that was going to be more hoorah, I guess, than a mechanic. And that was my only other choice.
Right. And like I said, that's why celebrating women is so important, because I mean, just in 2001, you couldn't even pick the MOS that you actually wanted. Like,
Mhm.
so,
What Navy?
so tell us about your time in Baghdad.
Yeah, so we were the first permanent establishment after the Marines and whoever else went through and took over the country. So we lived in a bombed out resort that was one of Saddam Hussein's top people, in the green zone. We only had 2 walls because the other 2 were blown up by an explosion, and there were still remnants of bombs and soot and just shrapnel everywhere. So we cleaned it up and made it nice, and eventually moved into the basement and got bathrooms and air conditioning. But I mean, we moved there in the summer in Baghdad. It's excruciatingly hot, and we didn't even have toilets. I mean, these are things that people don't think about. When you think about Ukraine and the people stuck in the steel plant for 60 days to 90 days, how are they even going to the bathroom? And so, I try to make it real by calling it How to Pee Standing Up, because there's so many things that people don't even think about when it comes to going into combat. And especially as a woman, I couldn't knock on somebody's door to use their bathroom, and I couldn't drop trow in the middle of an urban fighting environment to go to the bathroom. Like, that would have offended everybody. Plus, I don't really want to do that in front of people either. So I bought a 99-cent funnel from Fleet Farm, which is I don't know, Home Depot maybe in your world. And I went to the bathroom with a funnel.
Yeah, you had to make do like that.
Yeah.
So that funnel where you like put oil through.
Yes.
Like,
Yeah. It was blue.
mhm.
It was bright blue. So I sprayed camouflage on it and just carried it everywhere I went. I had a little carabiner that I stuck onto my uniform if I had to walk away, and I knew it'd be a long time. And yeah.
Yeah, that's one thing that, as a combat veteran, that people don't realize, that when you're in combat, all those little niceties that you have at home, you don't have.
Yeah.
And a lot of people don't understand that, and they're like, oh, well, you're over there and it wasn't all that bad. I'm like, you have no clue.
Right.
When I came out of Iraq, to sit on a porcelain toilet to me was worth more than any money in the world, because I was so sick of going anywhere, like you were saying, or sitting in a porta potty where sand fleas would just eat your ass up.
Oh, and you're sweating nonstop, and
Yeah,
it's just
nasty
impossible to pull things
smell.
up and down. And
Camel
although,
spiders.
yeah, although after peeing in the shrubs or going to the bathroom in bags or whatever we had to do, getting those porta potties, it was like the Rolls Royce of bathrooms. And you go anywhere in the United States and people are like, ew, porta potties. I'm like, trust me, it gets much worse.
Right?
So you went from porta potties to peeing and standing up in the funnel
Yeah.
to transitioning out. And I'm not trying to minimize your career or anything, but like, we only have so much time.
No, it's totally fine.
So you transition out of the military, and then now you are a strategic consultant for leadership, right?
Yes.
And so walk me through, how do you go from being an MP to a principal to now doing what you do now?
Great question. So, just to say I did more than go to the bathroom in Iraq, I'll just say that our main purpose was to train the Iraqi police officers while we were there. So I made great relationships with them and with the interpreters. And then we also escorted a lot of US and UN personnel. In fact, one of the Australian UN ambassadors, security guards, proposed to a girl in my squad. So we got very close with many really renowned individuals and got to see some beautiful parts of Baghdad, but also very dangerous parts too. So those are our primary missions. So when I joined, I was already at UW-Madison, and I was already getting my degree to be a physical education teacher. And I really started diving into the challenge and adventure aspects. So the ropes courses, the rock climbing, camping, spelunking, all that really cool outdoor stuff, and building communities and teams and taking these heterogeneous groups of students and creating a really cool family within a semester. And I was making this huge difference with these students. I'm still getting wonderful Facebook messages or texts or connecting somehow by these students who are like, you made the biggest difference when I was in high school. Thank you. And so while I was there, I was like, what can I do to make an even bigger difference? Because right now I can affect my 5 classes I have a semester, but what if I could affect the whole school? So I went back to school to get my admin degree and became dean of students, and realized, when your first interaction with a student is punitive, it's really hard to build relationships. So then I started exploring the role of admin. And so that's how I got my first job as a middle school principal, or assistant principal, into the principal role eventually. And so I did that for 4 years. And through COVID and just extreme changes within the educational system, and I have 3 young kids. I have a 5-year-old, almost 7, and almost 9-year-old. It got to a point where my passion was just kind of oozing out of me. There's so many stressors and just so much negativity within that occupation, that I said, well, I promised myself in Baghdad that I wouldn't do anything I didn't love, because life is too fleeting. I mean, there were so many times when I thought I wasn't going to make it out of there. And you just, same thing as this feeling, you just never know. And I want to live my best life, and I want to live my best life with my kids. And so that's when I decided I'm going to take all of this knowledge that I've gained from all of my experiences in life, and I'm going to become a consultant and a professional speaker.
Awesome. So what sort of companies or people will hire you to be a consultant or a professional speaker?
Yeah, great question too. Right now I work with really anybody who's hiring or promoting within. That's a huge pocket of individuals that don't necessarily get the training they need. And those internal promotions can be really tough when you change the dynamics of relationships. So you go
Right.
from being peers to somebody to being in this power status. And if you don't get started on the right foot, it can be really detrimental. And then those bosses lose a great employee at the peer level, and then potentially could lose you as a leader. And now they're having to fill 2 voids. So I really want to help organizations to make sure that those newly promoted leaders succeed at any organization, large, small. And I also just help. I'm a trusted advisor. I'm working with a lot of individuals who want to hire the right people or build stronger teams. And that's really what I do, because again, so much experience with really developing great community within organizations.
Right. I think that's important because a lot of people think that leaders are born, and that's not necessarily true, because
Right.
leaders are also trained, and they can be taught. There's
Mm.
different kinds of leadership skills, and different ways you can get people to follow you. And if you are put into a leadership position not knowing any of that, then how are you going to succeed as a leader, or how would people follow you? How are you going to transform, you know, your people if you
Right.
don't have that training? And for me, I recall when I got out the military, I thought, oh, I'm just going to tell people what to do and they're going to do it because that's how it works. Uh,
Mm.
no, newsflash, that's not how it fucking works. I made people cry. I've made people almost quit. I have gotten talked to by like district managers, like, Len, you can't talk to people that way. I'm like, what do you mean? I'm just telling them what's up, straight up. And like, for me, it was a learning curve.
Yeah. Well, and that's a huge, just knowing that people don't say okay like they do in the military. You have
Right.
to explain the why, and you have to
Mm,
develop those relationships and that trust before you can take anybody with you, or before they want to follow you, really.
right.
There's a whole skill we have to learn when we get out home.
Yeah.
It's a whole different skill. Like, I know, like, and I hate to be one of those back in my day.
We
But
won't talk about
like,
that.
a lot of my friends were like, now today is a little bit kindler and gentler. But back in my day, people were scared to get out because they didn't know how to talk to civilians. They
Mhm.
didn't know, like, to navigate that. And so, yeah, that was where I was coming from. But as far as leadership comes from within, um, if you don't know how to separate, the two, like being
Mhm.
friends, like say you're friends with your peers now, but then you get promoted. If you don't
Yeah.
know how to separate those friendships and then the leadership part, then it'll crumble also.
Yeah, the favoritism, and
Mhm.
absolutely. And that's the thing too, you could be a great leader, but you could still make mistakes. And so part of my job is to make sure that they get started on the right foot and they can learn from others before they do those mistakes themselves.
You know, it's interesting because when you go out of, I was in the military for 34 years and just retired last August, and actually turned down a promotion to CW5 because people are like, well, why'd you retire? I was like, COVID killed my career because I realized my kids, I have a 7-year-old and 18-year-old, were more important in the military at that time. But, you know, my degree's in business and sociology, and they're like, well, why did you pick sociology? And you brought up a good point. When you leave the military and go into the corporate world, or you're in the military and you're no longer in a line unit, now you're in a staff unit, right? What you figure out very quickly is that in each floor, in each office of a corporation, a staff of whatever, they operate as their own society.
Yeah.
And once you learn how to navigate inside of that society and realize the pros and cons of it, then you be able, and that's what you're helping these employees do when they get promoted internally, is to navigate inside each one of those separate societies inside of that organization. A lot of people don't realize that.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. And, you know, to your point, it's really easy when you first get promoted or get a leadership role to think, okay, here's some changes I want to make. But then after you're there, and you don't want to make immediately, so you kind of hold off and you see how things go. But then after about a year, you start speaking that language of that society and you forget about those changes you want to make. So I'm also there to help you continue to strategize on how to improve, because sometimes an outside perspective is really valuable, or somebody who was at the peer status who knows what kind of changes you should make based on where you used to be. That can be really powerful when you get promoted, but it's easy to lose sight of that when you start just getting into the weeds.
Yeah, that's so true. I like how both of y'all brought up a point where family is super important and you want to live your life. And I know, Brandy, you've talked about this too. You do things for your daughter. And I found a TikTok yesterday. You guys, you know, I love talking about TikTok. And it said, I hate to ruin your day, but 50 is not middle age. It's 35 and 40.
Yeah, thanks for depressing me on
Yeah. My bad. I mean, like, people typically live to like 70s and 80s, right? So I'm 38. So you have to make that decision to make your, you know, to be happy and to live your life. You only get one shot at this, right? And so Laura, you did that. Cliff, you did that. I did that. Brandy, I'm sure you did that. And that's super important. So tell us a little bit about your home life, Laura, and how it's helped you become a better person, mom, wife.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like I mentioned, I grew up in a very loving and wonderful family, and that's been really helpful. I can't imagine navigating this world without him. My older brother was also a veteran. He was in Ramadi, Iraq, when I was there at the same time. And then I have a twin brother who ironically was a teacher and now is a police detective. And so I went police to teacher.
Wow.
I know. Our lives are incredibly parallel. And my husband is really supportive. You know, it's been interesting though, and I want to know how you all feel with this too. It's almost like I have to teach him though how to respond to me and my post-traumatic stress, because he's never, like, he doesn't deal with it obviously because he wasn't in the military, and he doesn't always understand what I need in a moment. So having that open communication with him has helped immensely with me getting through some certain, you know, parts within our marriage. Have you noticed the same thing with you?
Well, you know, it's tough because, you know, of course, I'm a suicide survivor, and my wife knew nothing about that part of my life. And
Wow.
and she's still in the military. She's active duty Navy. And so it's hard because you may not understand why you're feeling that way that day, right? And your spouse knows something's wrong, but they don't understand what's wrong. And, you know, my wife and I were both very type A people. So we don't argue because we know how it's going to end. Neither one of us is going to admit defeat. It's just not going to happen. Pros and cons to that. But one thing she's very good at, she's a nurse in the Navy, she's a commander, is sometimes it's just good to listen, right? And that was hard for me to just listen to her. She's like, I don't want you to fix my problems. I don't want you to do anything, because men always want to fix things. I just want you to listen. Right. And sometimes I think for men, we forget that when your spouse is having a bad day or she's stressed out with the kids and she's talking, sometimes it's good just to shut your mouth and listen to her. And sometimes we just always want to jump in and help. I was a warrant officer, right? So I want to fix it, right? Move on, fix it, move on. And what Cliff needed to do was shut his damn mouth and listen to what she was saying and pay attention to what she was saying. And so that's very hard. I mean, my wife's stationed in Rhode Island right now. We're separated family again. And we've been together for 14 years and we've lived in separate houses for 7.
Yeah. So
So as you were saying with your husband who is not familiar with PTSD or things, I think the most important thing for you is he'll never understand it, but he's going to be supportive of you in
that's what I
that.
was gonna
And
say.
just sit down with him and say, honey, there might be a time where I just need to go sit in a dark room and be by myself for a little bit. And I need you to understand this. It doesn't mean I'm mad at you. Doesn't mean I hate you. Doesn't mean I don't love you. It just means that I need to have this moment for my life because something went on and I just need to go deal with it the way I know how to deal with it.
Yeah.
And we all deal with it differently, and that's what I always talk about on my podcast, Mental Health Warrior, is you got to have different tools in your toolbox when PTSD sneaks in. And people forget that's only going to be one thing to fix it. It's not one thing to fix it. It's going to be multiple things and multiple community. And that's why we're all here doing what we're doing.
Yes.
But I think if you just I'm getting choked up. If you just let your husband understand that, I think maybe he'll better be able, anybody listening would be able to understand that. I mean, October 3rd is a day that affects me. Of course, I was at Pentagon on 9/11. And so those days, you just, and maybe let him know of certain dates that bother you. And maybe he can be more sensitive to those times in your life that you had bad things go on.
I'd also like to add that it's a lot of people have a misconception that everyone has to understand them. That, oh, this person doesn't fully understand me. They don't get me. So I'm just gonna shy away or seclude myself because these people don't get me. Civilians don't get me. My spouse doesn't get me. My friends don't get me. Arr. The thing is, nobody's going to fully understand you, but you.
Yeah.
So it's up to the individual to be self-aware. If you have that self-awareness of what actually triggers you, then you can have that communication. If you don't have that self-awareness, you're just going to be like, rah, 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 or like seclude yourself, right? And that's not healthy.
Right.
And so I would encourage people to have some self-reflection, have that time to give yourself some grace or time to reflect and meditate on that. Because if you don't know yourself, then how are you going to help other people navigate you and your traumas? Because you can't always expect people to know what you're going through. You can't, like, if I am somebody's spouse and I don't know their triggers, I would hate to walk around eggshells all day. That would be a terrible life, so I think it's on both parts. Hopefully you have an understanding spouse or friends or parents or whatever it is, workplace even, for them to understand, hey, listen, I have these traumas. Sometimes I need to be left alone, kind of like what Cliff was saying. So I just wanted to point that out. Brandy, I know you have some stuff to say about that too.
Yeah, well, I was going to say, like, really with PTSD, I think a lot of people really don't look at alternative treatments or take that PTSD seriously as far as managing that. And I think that so often, like, we can surround ourselves with people that don't necessarily understand PTSD. They may diminish the PTSD, and sometimes they gaslight it a bit. And we need to be careful as veterans as well, like, or just people with PTSD, right? That, when we surround ourselves with like the right or wrong people, if we were to be triggered, what would happen? Because there's been times that I've been triggered in public places or, around people that really didn't understand and they diminished it and it made it worse. And it was, and I think so often caregivers, they don't get the training or education that they really need to better understand, like, this person is being triggered. These are things that you could do, to maybe help or, and because the veteran doesn't always know, or the person doesn't always know, these are my issues. This is what's going on. A lot of times they're just trying to like survive their own life. And I think that education is just so important and it's just so, I guess, underseen. And I think that that's something I'd really like to see, like, more of is just education and just knowledge and like ways that you could actually better manage it. Because I think a lot of us could probably learn something. I mean, including myself, I'm always learning something new.
That's true.
That's such a good point, Brandy. And I loved what you all said, because I could see myself in all of those places since I've gotten home in 2004. When I first got home, I had no idea what was happening. I had no idea how to manage it. And I had to do a ton of soul searching to figure out how do I convey this to others, and how do I take care of myself? And at one point I just finally had to go to the VA to get the help that I needed, because I couldn't do it myself anymore. And I mean, I had a friend, God, it was thunderstorming and we were at a cabin on a lake. And every time that boom happened, I like flinched and freaked out, and like tears came to my eyes, and she just laughed at me because she didn't know how to respond and I didn't know how to tell her to respond.
That's the worst
But,
feeling.
huh?
That's the worst feeling too.
Yes. Yes. Like, I'm like, do I go home? Do I like, oh, it was terrible. So, it's come a long way. And to Cliff's point, I definitely know what to say to my husband now. I'm like, give me space, or just give me a hug, or let me talk to you, but please don't give me a solution right now or play the devil's advocate. Just let me talk. So having those conversations have just been incredibly helpful with dealing with it.
It's sometimes I post things on Facebook and then I have to tell all my friends, look, I'm not having issues or problems. I posted one a while back about my suicide attempt, and sometimes I just reflect back on what would happen had I not survived, right? And then I start thinking about all the positives of what happened since 2002, right? And so as your mind drifts, you turn a negative into a positive. But I had to text all my friends and say, hey, I'm okay. I'm just doing a posting that came to mind. But that's how I deal with my
Yeah, you did that this morning.
Yeah, that's how I deal with my PTSD is if something comes to mind, I just want to share it. And so I get it out there, and I'm sure you do the same thing with your blogs, you and Brandy with the podcast and stuff. You just share things that come to your mind because you think that if it bothers me, then maybe it might bother somebody else, and maybe what I do might help them.
Yeah.
I
mean, that's part of the whole reason why I wrote this. I mean, it was like a therapy session for 2 years, and I can't tell you how many people who have read this that are civilians that finally feel like they can get a better understanding of what soldiers go through when they get home and how to help them. So, I mean, if anything that came out of it, I'm just glad that there's some, I don't know if I want to call it closure, but there's some help.
Clarity.
Clarity for
Yeah.
family. Thank you. Yeah. Or family and friends. Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about your blogs, because you write blogs too. What are your blogs consist of, and what are they about?
They're called Thursday Thoughts, and they're mostly for any leader really out there. I cater them a lot to business leaders, but if you're just a leader, it's just how to deal with people. And a lot of it is related to what's going on in either the news or, I like this one's focused on mothers because it was just Mother's Day, or working moms, I should say. At 2021, the new year, I wrote 21 lessons I learned in 2021. And so just helping anybody who wants some leadership lessons, that's what they're for. And you can get them. I always post them on LinkedIn, but also lauracolbert.com is my website. And so they're on there as well. And I just rebooted a new website. So unfortunately, a lot of my older blogs aren't on there. I have to kind of go back and forth and get them on there yet, but they go back to December. So
I'm going to go follow you on LinkedIn now.
Sounds good.
I didn't know you were on LinkedIn. I got to follow you on there too.
Yeah.
Everybody has one.
Go ahead, Lynn.
No, go ahead.
I just wanted to say that, I do speaking events prior to my podcast for Veterans Trash Talk. I travel all over the world doing speaking events, much like you, Laura. And, when Afghanistan happened, the debacle, when we pulled out Afghanistan, I had so many corporations call me, wanting to come in and speak to their veterans organizations, because so many people was affected. But what I found out was that when I went out and I spoke to them, and I spoke to all employees to these corporations, not just to the veterans group. Now I went and had luncheon with the veterans group afterwards, but just the employees themselves that were affected because their coworkers were affected by it. And you could just kind of see that throughout the whole corporation. And it was really touching that something I didn't realize a lot of these corporations, one, had veterans group, but two, had these mind centers where these employees could go to talk to a wellness coach or talk to somebody. They had set those up. Turner Construction Company was one of them that had a really good program. And that was just really nice, and something that I hadn't really experienced a whole lot. But, and it's just a great thing that corporations now are looking to better understand, but not only PTSD with their veterans workers, but also with their workers inside themselves. Because like I was telling the president of the company, somebody could be driving to work and getting a car wreck or see a car wreck or any kind of trauma. It doesn't have to be war related. and that's PTSD. And so it's not just a war related injury. It can happen to anybody. And I think sometimes people get too wrapped up. It's a veteran thing, and it's not just a veteran thing. Kids can have trauma, young adults can have trauma, teenagers can have trauma. And so it's a whole circle of life things with PTSD. And I think sometimes people forget that.
Yeah, and I love that you talk to everybody in the organization, because it goes right back to what we were talking about. It's how do you support the veterans, or how do you, and again, that solidarity with post-traumatic stress. And there's so many family trauma things that happen as well, domestic trauma. I mean, it's everywhere. And I don't know if it's getting better, but there's still a stigma. And so the more we can talk about it, the better it is.
You know, one thing I learned, I had Rachel Van Horn on my show, and she's a life coach. And she was talking about if you had trauma as a child, that if you have trauma as an adult, it's just that much worse. Now, like you, I had a very happy childhood. We were poor, but we were farmers. We didn't know we were poor because we were never hungry. But I had a happy childhood.
Yeah.
So, you know, my PTSD, my suicide attempt, you know, was something that if somebody would have told me, you know, in 2001, by the end of 2002, you'd be laying on the couch dying by your own hand, I'd never believe them. It just wasn't going to happen to me, but it did happen. And I think sometimes that trauma, that if you're dealing with trauma that happened to you younger, and now you're dealing with trauma now, it just makes it that much worse. When you do go to therapy and you start peeling back those layers of that onion, and it gets really ugly. And so I always tell people that it's very important to understand that, but just know that once those layers are gone, you'll enjoy the sunshine and the moonlight as you did before all that happened. And it's just, sometimes it's a hard road to get through.
Yeah, for sure.
So Laura, what do you have, advice do you have for new leaders that are coming out of the military and into the workforce?
Well, I mean, make sure that you've got a good mentor or an advisor, or somebody who you can bounce ideas off of, you can give scenarios to. I've got two groups here in town. One is a leadership lunch, which is actually why I have to leave. And it's just local leaders. And we do a mastermind group at the end where people can bring their problems to the table. And then I also am starting up, it's called WIN, Women's Influential Network, here in the area. And so women could also have camaraderie and can have that time to bounce ideas and learn from each other. So make sure that you're part of a really robust network that can help you grow and multiply your experiences. It's just, you live one lifetime, but if you can have 20 people in your life that can give you more experience, that's going to be huge. Mm-hmm. And take time. Don't make rash decisions. Don't feel like you have to have the answer right away. Make sure that you really do your due diligence and your research and find the historical context. If something doesn't seem right, ask a lot of questions. Don't make assumptions. That's one of the worst things that you can do as a newly promoted leader. Just ask questions if you don't understand it, either from somebody that is under your charge or somebody that's your superior. That's one of my goals in life, is to always make sure that my assumptions are answered, because that's where errors occur a lot. And then clear expectations for everybody.
Oh yeah.
You don't know what's expected of you, or if your employees don't know what's expected from you, that's where all the anger, the misconceptions, so clear expectations are huge.
Yeah, I learned that when I learned that when I went to, because I have my BSBA and my MBA, and that was one of the first things I learned, was like establish expectations right away. Because if like they don't understand why, or one day they do something and then you say, oh no, that's wrong. Well, you didn't establish that, you know, and then that's, so I totally agree. Thanks so much for that advice for our new leaders out there. And I do want to thank you so much for being on our show. We're going to go ahead and get some final thoughts. Brandy, do you have any final thoughts that you want to leave with us today?
So I did actually want to talk about a woman veteran. So she's kind of like my shero. It's actually Congresswoman Tammy Duckworth. She actually is an Army veteran, and she lost both legs and part of damage to her right arm, but she does help a lot of the veteran community. And I think that's pretty amazing. As far as final thoughts, I think that what Laura's doing is amazing. I mean, PTSD, just getting that information out there, it's okay to not be okay, and for you, for your book. I mean, you're real. And I think it's something that people outside of the military, they need to see that part of, I guess, military life, you know, especially from a woman's point of view. I think that it's very needed, and I can't wait to see what else that you do.
Thanks.
All right, Cliff, final thoughts.
Just want to say that to all the men out there that watch the podcast, and if you have a wife or a mother or a daughter or somebody who served in the military, just take the time to listen to them and talk to them. And Lynn, you brought up a great point, just to be self-aware, you know, about things. I think sometimes we forget that in the bustle and the hustle of life. But I want to say is I'm very proud to be on this podcast with the three women that are here. I'm thankful for your service. I served with some great women in my military career, and some who I served with Lady Nancy Fielding, who was the first female aviation pilot in North Carolina, an absolute phenomenal woman. To this day, I never forget the way she mentored me in several jobs that I had. And it's, you know, and men can have women mentors too. And I think sometimes people forget that. And I've had a lot of great ones in my life. And I just want to thank you all, not only for your service, but what all you've done after your service.
Thanks a lot for that, Cliff. All right, guys, we have so much to celebrate and so much to be thankful for. June is PTSD Awareness Month. Thanks, you guys, for having this conversation. It's very much needed. Laura, thanks for all you do in our community, as well as Cliff and Brandy. Everybody, keep doing what you're doing out there. If you haven't yet, click subscribe on that YouTube. We're on VeteranTrashTalk.com. You can listen, shop, and look at all of our stuff that we have to offer there. We're also on Facebook. VTT Official is our group, our support group. Veteran Trash Talk Facebook page. Brandy has her Facebook page. Yes, I Am the Veteran is her podcast. She is our newest podcaster with Veterans Trash Talk. She's not new to podcasting, but she's new to us, and we're so happy to have her. Cliff, the mental health warrior, he has his Facebook page, the mental health warrior, cliffordbauman.com and lauracolbert.com. Go ahead and check us all out. And that's it for today. Thanks for joining us on Throat Punch Monday, guys. See you next time.